Silly Bob 7, a high-level RuneScape player, spawns in Lumbridge with nothing except a sense of shock and disbelief. An hour earlier, he is raiding Chambers of Xeric with his friend, both of them using the best in-game items that are worth billions of gold, or thousands of dollars if paid for with membership bonds. But now, his bank is emptied of all its valuables. He has almost nothing left. This is the true story of how he and his friend tried to anti-scam the scammers. Silly Bob 7 plans to go out and enjoy some nature, taking a break from RuneScape, but thunderclouds roll in, foiling his plans. So he decides to log on to RuneScape to do some raids. He logs into the Tombs of a Masked Bank and spots a player in max gear named PBJD. This guy, PBJD, is talking about the last pet transmog he needs, specifically the Kefri one. He strikes up conversation with Silly Bob, making jokes and asking questions, and end up adding each other to their friends list. Over the next weeks, Silly Bob 7 and PBJD get along very well. They do raids together, split drops with each other, and join voice calls, talking about various topics such as RuneScape related things, and even about their personal lives. This looks to blossom into a great friendship. One day, PBJD calls Silly Bob 7 on Discord and starts his screen share. Silly Bob 7 starts watching as PBJD starts talking to people in a PvP world. And then he watches PBJD pick up an Elysian Spirit Shield and 200 million GP off the ground. And he teleports away. He got to watch his friend make out with over 1 billion GP in profit in just a few seconds. Silly Bob 7 is in shock. He's never seen anything like it in his life before. PBJD is flooded with private messages from the people he just takes the money from, messaging him the worst obscenities and claiming they know who he is and that they should never have dealt with him in the first place. Although Silly Bob 7 is amazed at what he just witnessed, he wants no part of it and deems it too risky for his liking. But PBJD trades Silly Bob 7 the 200 million gold that he just picked up from these scammers. That's a lot of money, even for a player like Silly Bob 7 who has billions of gold worth of gear on his account already. And he feels like this could actually be real. What's he got to lose? It's his friend we're talking about here. And this is fun. Scamming scammers, that is something that everybody wants to do. So Silly Bob and PB get in a Discord call. PB can't do the anti-scamming anymore because the scammers know about his account and the fact they got anti-scammed for one bill. So it's up to Silly Bob, who gears up in his most expensive gear, posing as bait. And he shares his screen with PB, ready to anti-scam the scammers. But before we get to the scammers' next move, a public service announcement from today's sponsor. Are you ordering takeout again? Okay, but that's like spending all your GP on a Toad Bata when your cooking level is 1. Why not level up your skills and cook something better yourself? HelloFresh is here making your wellness journey look delicious. With over 50 dinner options that are both delicious and healthy, what more can you ask for? And each box is fully customizable to fit your preferences and includes pre-portioned ingredients, so you only pay for what you need, delivered straight to your doorstep. Click the link in the description or use my code and get 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life. 1 breakfast item per box while subscription is active if you're in the US, and for outside the US, the local discount will apply. And once again, many thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring the video, and of course, anybody that checks out what they have to offer. After just a few minutes, a scammer approaches, flexes a few bill worth of items, and tells Silly Bob this can all be his, just so long as Silly Bob follows him to Lunar Isle. PB confirms this is it. This is the same scammer that he took 1 bill from. So he teleports to Lunar Isle with the teleport the scammer traded him. Now they go to the Lunar Isle bank, and Silly Bob is told to drink 3 Zamorak brews. The Zamorak brews have a self-damaging effect. After he's drunk every last dose as instructed, he's now sitting at 25 out of 99 hit points. Now the Zamorak brews have been drunk. The scammer insists him and Silly Bob must go to World 548, the high-risk PvP world, where players instantly skull, meaning they'll lose all of their items if they die. And Silly Bob, who now has 25 hit points, is easily one-hittable by anybody his level. But he knows the bank is a safe zone on this world, and PB in the voice call is eager to repeat the anti-scam so they can profit yet another Elysian Spirit Shield and 200 mil. Silly Bob banks all his items just to make sure the bank is safe when he hops over. He hops worlds, and he looks at the PvP logo. Good. PvP is not enabled here. He's safe. He checks all the Lunar Isle bank tiles to make sure they're safe too. Just outside the bank, there's a suspicious looking noob. He's out in the danger zone, but he's a low level. He can't even attack Silly Bob, so he's not a threat. So upon the request from the scammer, Silly Bob pulls out his expensive gear again. The scammer sends a trade request to Silly Bob. Little does he know that the person that sent this trade request actually teleported away with a Lunar Isle teleport. That person is waiting just 20 tiles to the east. So if Silly Bob accepts the trade request, he'll be dragged out of the bank to accept the trade. But by pure chance, Silly Bob right-clicks the low-level noob at this very moment and sees a terrifying level 111 right underneath him. Now, more on his guard, more skeptical, Silly Bob right-clicks the person who traded him. He's confused. He sees a slight difference between the two names. It's subtle, but something is off. Ah yes, the I in King is actually a capital L. The person who sent in the trade request is not the same person standing next to him. It just looks like a very similar name. He knows about this scam, and so he doesn't fall for it. He doesn't click accept trade. In the meantime, PB is oblivious to all this. He instructs Silly Bob to talk to the scammers and to tell them that he's not comfortable doing anything in the Lunar Isle Bank or in a PvP world. Silly Bob confronts the scammers and they make an offer to him. He can choose whatever world he likes, leaving the choice out of the scammers' hands. Silly Bob 7 decides on world 508. There's nothing special about this world, so now he thinks he's in control. Nothing could possibly go wrong now. But after selecting the world, the scammers tell Silly Bob 7 to make his way to the Ferox Enclave, which is deep in the wilderness. But PB offers an encouraging word. PB just knows that this is where they're gonna get the Ellie and 200 mil. The scammers have Silly Bob go to the tile they plan on dropping the items on. And with no items on him, Silly Bob is told to skull on the PKer behind the tree. Silly Bob isn't afraid of the skull. He's not even risking anything, and if he were, he knows not to go in the danger zone. The scammers drop 200 mil worth of items behind the tree. PB and Silly Bob are getting excited. This is their opportunity, the chance to win big. And if you look at the yellow line of tile markers, anything between the entrance and these tile markers is considered a safe zone, where players can't be attacked. But the scammers pick up the 200 mil and tell Silly Bob to go get all his valuable items once again. Otherwise, he's not getting anything. Silly Bob knows that he's not gonna go enter that dangerous zone to pick up the 200 mil. So while he's pulling his expensive gear out of the bank, he cleverly pulls out telegraph runes. PB tells him that this is the way to anti-scam these people. The telegraph spell allows you to retrieve items from a long distance without you needing to enter the wilderness. It's genius, and so Silly Bob does exactly that. He equips all of his best gear, confirms he can cast the telegraph spell, and walks out of Ferox Enclave into the safe zone. He goes from being in the Ferox Enclave safe spot to spawning in Lumbridge. Not only did he not get that 200 mil, but there's nothing in his inventory. He sits there in shock when all he hears is the sound of a Discord user disconnecting from a call, the call he was in with PB. He frantically messages his new friend he's been talking to for over 2 months, but all he's met with is his own messages in a crimson red text. The messages have not been delivered. It hits Silly Bob all at once. The sinking realization that not only did he just get scammed, but his friend he talked to every day, that joined his clan, that seemed so genuine and nice, was in on the scam the entire time. For weeks, PB was plotting this behind the scenes. Every message, every voice call, every action PB did was carefully calculated and all part of his plan. Silly Bob had never been PB's friend. He is his victim, his prey the entire time. But there's still a mystery to solve. What went wrong? Even though he was deceived by his friend, he was still in a safe zone when he was killed. Any area behind that yellow line is not dangerous. This safe zone is just a safeguard implemented by the old school team. Ferox Enclave is a popular hotspot in the wilderness, not only for PKers, but for PVMers alike, providing rejuvenation pools which restore the player's stats, all while being next to a bank. To prevent accidental mishaps of players clicking the barrier, the old school team created this safe zone just outside. But let's say you're fighting another player right outside of Ferox Enclave. You wouldn't want a player who has been teleblocked to be able to run into these safe zones at will. Therefore, these safe zones have a very specific condition where players who are in combat and one of them is teleblocked are both attackable by the other player that had previously initiated combat with them in the last 2 minutes. Silly Bob had attacked that player behind the tree, which started the 2-minute combat timer, because just a minute before that, the guy had already been teleblocked by his friend, allowing him to attack Silly Bob even in the yellow tiles. Then Silly Bob goes and withdraws all his valuable items, including those telegrab runes. And since he was already 1 hit point and 1 defense from the Zamorak bruise, he had no chance of survival the moment he stepped through that barrier. And even though Silly Bob 7 is an alias used to protect the submitter's identity, this story is a true account of a real scam victim. Even though they were aware of all the warning signs, knew how these scams worked, and had watched my videos before, the scammers were able to outsmart a person who is knowledgeable about the subject. Silly Bob ended up moving on from his main account and joined a group Iron Man with his friends, and continues to enjoy the game despite suffering such a big loss. Some of his advice is to not trust anything that seems too good to be true, no matter what, not even if you've already profited 200 mil from it. Scams on RuneScape are so elaborate that they'll wait for months until they fully build your trust. And even if you think you're going to outsmart the scammers, nothing compares to experience. These guys know what they're doing. So, don't try this at home, and if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Thank you for watching. A real fan of the channel submitted this story, and we wanted to bring it to life to share the dangers of fake friends on RuneScape. Like the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to see more scam tactics exposed.